All right, for this one, I'm going to talk to you about different ways you can use your paintbrush when you're watercoloring. The first thing I want to do is show you how to do a thick and thin line. So I'm going to get my brush wet, but not too wet. If you get too much sogginess, just, touch it on your towel to get it off. I'm going to dip my brush in the paint. I'm going to kind of test it to see if it's too wet. So that looks pretty good to me. Okay, so here I go. I'm going to hold my fingers really down close to the end of my brush. And I'm just going to try to press hard and then less hard and then hard again. Okay, to sort of get a controlled line. Now I'm doing all of these with my number 10 round, okay? So I don't necessarily have to have a skinnier brush to do this, okay? Here we go, I'm gonna try another squiggle here. I'm gonna go light, heavy, light, heavy, light. Okay, to give you some idea of what you can practice with. Now I'm gonna try just doing narrow lines with my brush. So I've got it wet. I'm going to make sure my tip is kind of, back to a point and not all frazzly. So this time I'm going to use a really light touch because I just want very thin lines. So I'm just going to do thin, thin. Okay, so you see, just with my same big brush, I can do pretty thin lines with my watercolor paint. Okay, so now I'm going to try to do a thicker line. So same procedure. I've got my brush wet, but not, soaking wet. And I'm just going to go all the way across, pushing down the whole way. So I'm going to go, okay, so you see I can make pretty thick lines. Now I want to talk about some stippling, which you can do, which is sort of like a little set of dots. This works really well if you're going to do like shading, or it just makes a nice texture. So I've got paint on my brush and I'm just going to make little bitty dots. Okay, so you got to keep your touch really light. And since we're just practicing, it doesn't have to be perfect. So just try to keep a light touch and see what kind of dots you can make. You can also, if you'd rather have a different shape, and I can show you some things I've done with different sort of stippling. You can almost make a little like a little curve, I guess, too, instead of a dot. So you can almost, like, if you push it down, you can almost do it that way to make a texture. And you can see, obviously, the lighter it's going to get, the lighter, the more you paint. So, all right, so you can use that texture as well. I can also, I'm going to try to dry this brush off as much as I can with my rag here. And I'm going to see what happens if my brush is dry. Oh, not much difference. Okay, let me try a really dry brush from my jar. Okay, no water on this at all. I don't know if my paints are like too wet for this, but let's see what happens. Oh, okay. So you can see it's going to be a little bit like scratchier. So it's definitely going to be a different texture with a dry brush, but that might be a texture that you would like in your painting. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, of course, we all know the splatter that we can use to make texture. So before you do this at home, please make sure you are not getting watercolor paint all over your mom or your dad's or your whatever parent is at your house favorite table or rug or anything like that, because it is almost impossible to control a splatter. So there are my different textures I want you to try. Make a note when you finished in pencil which is which, so that if you want to come back to it, if somebody else is looking at your paper and they're like, oh my gosh, that looks so cool, how did you do that? That way you'll be able to remember what you did. So I didn't divide my paper up this time because I knew that I was just going to do brush strokes and not fill the whole thing. So that's why this one I just did the outside. All right, I'm going to come back with some other things we can do.